Hey everybody, it's Kyle Lacey. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Revenue Diaries, where we talk about everything other than work. My guests don't get the questions ahead of time. Before we get into this week's guest, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, Share Your Genius. If you have any ideas around content, especially how you build a content engine, including a podcast like this one, that drives more revenue, drives more brand, drives more opportunities, please go check them out. Share Your Genius. Thank you again for sponsoring this podcast. All right. This episode is somebody that I've known for a long time, and I've never actually had the pleasure of speaking to at length. His name is Adam Singer. He is VP of Marketing of a company called AdQuick. Him and I have been connected since the early days of FriendFeed. And if those of you who know FriendFeed, you know it was the place to be in 2007, 2008. Shout out to Brett Taylor for creating the thing. We talk about a lot of stuff, and I don't want to ruin it for you, but we talk about how modern atheists are wrong, sobriety, this idea of hobbies and music, and also some of Adam's thoughts around the American Eagle ad campaign and how marketing is being a little bit vanilla. So we have a ton of stuff. I'm so pumped that you're here to listen to it. And so I'm going to shut up because I want you to hear. I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Adam Singer. Adam, thank you for joining us. Could you give a brief intro, what you focus on, your company, and what you do?
Sure thing, Kyle. So I'm VP Marketing at AdQuick. We are the premier out-of-home ad tech. We're basically making it as easy to buy out-of-home ads anywhere in the world as you would on Google or Facebook or any online platform. We're basically transforming, the entire world of out-of-home media, billboards, airport displays, drone shows, even boats, into something that you can manage from your laptop anywhere in the world. So it's really exciting, especially at a time when the internet is changing, people are blocking ads online. We're actually in a place that's having pretty consistent, 7 to 9% growth every year, because it's one of the few channels that you can't block ads that people actually pay attention to. When people are on their phone, there's so much going on, or ads are seen as spam. So it's a good place to be. I'm having a lot of fun here.
And so for those of you listening that you're thinking, well, we don't talk about business on this show, that's fair. But however, when my team started talking about out of home, the first person I referred them to was Adam's LinkedIn content. So if you want a good balance of personal and professional, go to LinkedIn, find Adam Singer. It will be in the show notes. But in terms of out of home, you're my go-to for ideas. My team needs to talk to your team. I don't think that's happened yet, but we can figure that out after the show.
Awesome. Not here to sell you.
No, I know you're not. That's why I'm prefacing it for the people listening. But okay, so first question. You and I have been connected actually for a long time. I'm pretty sure that we originally met around 2008, 2009, maybe even earlier than that on FriendFeed. I'm pretty sure we came across, and that's a
throwback name. FriendFeed was great, by the way. What a fun product idea. It was so sad when they were bought by Facebook, because for the younglings listening, FriendFeed basically brought together all of the places that you post online and share content. So you had your Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, your blog, everywhere in one place. It was this wonderful, beautiful product. I'm surprised no one's tried to make something similar again. We have all the social media management tools. It's kind of the read end of that, versus as marketers, we have tools to be able to post all those places at once. But for a consumer perspective, no one's built anything. I'm surprised.
I am too. It was the first time I experienced the kind of wall effect of being able to go in and see what everybody was posting and the threaded comments. And I know that Reddit and all those were doing it, but that was, for me personally, that was my first intro to that type of communication. And I miss it to this day. You could go to Facebook and get the same thing, but it's not anywhere near the community that was built, in my opinion, because of it. There's still people that I follow and talk to that I met on FriendFeed. So Brett Taylor, thank you. I know you're doing other things, but we appreciate the impact you made with FriendFeed. Everything else I don't care about, Brett, but you did great on FriendFeed. Okay, so the one thing I've always admired is your ability to speak your mind, even when sometimes it can be controversial. And you wrote about this idea of sharing controversial things and how some people believe disagreement is betrayal. If you're not fully aligned with their worldview, you must be an enemy. No nuance, no questions, no grace, nothing, right? I struggle with this quite regularly. How should the rest of us think about sharing strong views publicly? And how do you balance that with the job, knowing that everybody has different types of jobs, and it depends. Like, I work for a public company, you work for a startup, right? Very kind of differing views and opinions there in terms of what you should share and how you should share it. But how should the rest of us think about sharing opinions online with your job?
Yeah. First, I'll start with anyone who thinks disagreement is betrayal. Something has gone wrong with how they process the world. Like, that's almost being in a cult where, no one can say anything. And this can happen on the left or the right, right? There's like people on the right as well who, if you don't follow everything Trump says or whatever, you're part of, the enemy, which obviously can't be true either. So, I mean, I've been consistently the same how I publish online. Kyle, I worked for Google for like 6 or 7 years, and, they're a big public company. And actually, one of the reasons I was okay with joining Google is when I was being interviewed, they told me specifically to continue posting as I always had online. The VP at Google had actually been a reader of my blog for a long time, and that was one of the reasons he hired me. And he basically said, we don't want you to change who you are. I think they're a pretty cool company in that regard. I understand not every company is as amenable. And certainly there's industries like if you're in defense or maybe healthcare or finance where there's FINRA and there's regulatory about what people, may say online. I think that, making sure that before you join a company, understand what their expectations are for what you might say online. There's basic decorum of what you can actually talk about and what ways you can talk about it while working at any job in corporate America. And so I think there's like an obvious line. I don't think I've crossed it, which is why I continue to be employed. Certainly, if I was going to be an extreme right or extreme left poster and go like full activist, then there might be some questions. And the interesting thing is in corporate America, there are actually people who I would say are fairly activist online, especially in the marketing industry, where I see what they post and I'm like questioning how they're actually employed at this given company. Because I've talked about this on my podcast where I kind of agree with the Coinbase guys where they were basically saying, don't bring your whole self to work. And so what that means is, I think if you want to be an activist and you want to be someone who's really in support of whatever large revolutionary cause or social change, that's great. And maybe you need to join a nonprofit or advocacy group that's focused on that. But I don't think you come to work and you get to use work as your platform to promote your pet cause. With that said, I think there's like broadly some values aligned with Western civilization and things like perhaps freedom of speech or things like making sure that there's a fair and just society and resources are allocated appropriately and criminals don't just go free to do whatever they want. Even in your given sector, bad actors exploiting naivety or young people. Anyway, right. I think there are certain things where if you talk about them through the lens of what would a classical liberal or normal conservative think, I don't think you're actually at risk of getting fired. I don't think any reasonable person is going to see your post and be like, hey, this person's got to go. But what that means is you can't do what MSNBC does and call everyone a fascist or a Nazi or whatnot, right? Like normal people don't do that. They're trying to rile everyone up. Like I think if you want to be a voice online and speak your mind, you actually have to have a strong moral compass. You probably should already be a voice online. You probably should already be someone who's part of these conversations. And then the company knows what they're getting when they come to the table. Like I assume if you post a lot online and you go to work somewhere, that company has looked at what you said and are like, oh, this person is a risk and liability. And this goes beyond politics, right? Like just how you treat others. And you're looking at the company too, right? You're looking at what they allow and what they do. So I think these things tend to work themselves out and get to the point of culture fit is what people like to say. But I would say if you are someone who has a voice in the world, I wouldn't change it for an employer because ultimately it's just not gonna, it's not gonna end well if you guys aren't all aligned on how you see the world anyway.
Yeah. And I've been questioned, like, why don't you post? Like, I post a lot online, and I've been questioned, why haven't you posted about this or this issue, or why aren't you more vocal? And I made a decision very early on that I would have to really, truly believe in the idea to post it. And I don't share a lot of personal beliefs online outside of some things that are more centrist oriented and not extreme. I just made that decision that my personal thoughts and beliefs and who I donate money to and what I think is more on my personal life. And if you have questions about it, feel free to ask me, but don't come at me like you should be posting about this stuff, because it's my decision. It's my personal call. Right. And that,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it's very much if it's something you're passionate about as a leader, you need to make the call based off of the company you're joining that they would be okay with it. Because
Yeah.
I would argue that not a lot of companies look at social feeds of people when they're hiring, even though they probably should. But that sounds like, so it's you just need to be able to balance it.
Yeah. And a couple other comments. I don't think anyone should be pressured to say anything online about a given topic. Like, that's strange. Like, why is someone doing that? What is their agenda? And the other thing I'll say is, the richest guy in the world, Elon Musk, I think he has broadened the Overton window of what any executive can say online. You can like or hate Elon, it doesn't matter. I think in a lot of ways, even if you don't like him, you could say it's actually a good thing that he has made it and given permission to a lot of other people just to be more earnest and more genuine. Because you could say a lot of things about him, but he's, expressive. And I actually like that. I think in corporate comms, we've gone so far down the line of having everything be approved and kind of vanilla warmed over. And I understand why for certain sectors like finance or healthcare, you certainly shouldn't be a shit poster. But in other areas, maybe it's not so serious and maybe can have a little bit of fun. Like, when did fun leave the planet and everyone's buttoned down all the time, right? Like, I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that, yeah.
You have a brilliant, I don't remember the title of the article on your Substack, but it was something about the death of creativity, or why did marketing become not fun? I'm sure you have multiple articles that kind of talk about that, but I didn't have any questions on that, but I definitely appreciate the fact that I feel like a lot of what we do today is just bland and not cool and not fun. And yeah, I really wish we could get back to that.
Yeah, I called it the blandification of marketing. It's like the professional managerial class world where everything goes through, 20 layers of approval. And I was talking with one of our marketing peers about this the other day. And I think it's kind of sad. Like, we've, in a lot of cases, not everyone, but in a lot of cases, we've let the legal and compliance people have too much power. And marketers need to take that back. We need to be the final arbiter of taste. We need to be able to do things that, like Seth Godin used to say, be remarkable, right? Like, the purple cow is something to remark about, versus having every company look like this boring software company, right? Like, you want to be interesting, unless maybe you are the boring software company, selling compliance software, and maybe that buyer does want you to be boring. Great. But in a lot of other cases,
I sell learning management software, which includes a compliance element, and I don't want to be boring either. So, I think that
maybe the compliance people don't want boring content either.
I don't think anybody does, right? We all want to be creative. We all want to be moved emotionally with marketing, which, going back to the first book I ever read on it, which was Emotional Branding by Mark Dobey, and I might be butchering his last name, but that's all he talks about, right? Is the Coke bottle design, the emotions behind, like, all the stuff that goes into great marketing, in my opinion. But okay, we'll digress. We're not supposed to talk about work, but you write a lot about commitment and persistence, specifically being a superpower. Even more importantly, if you're doing it without substances, which you call a durable commitment. So requiring something like drugs, alcohol use is not persistence, right? You're just high and eventually you'll burn out when they stop working. I've been sober for over a year. I don't remember, you're well past 1,000 days now, right?
Yeah, I'm at something like 3 years sober, except for
3 years
caffeine.
sober. Except for caffeine. Well, I
still
drink.
have caffeine.
I mean, for those of you listening, we're both drinking too much caffeine probably right now. But it was partly part of my reason to cut it for a lot of other reasons, which I've gotten into before, but was reading your musings on it, and especially dangers of alcohol and life being just better without it, because I completely agree. How do you see sobriety as a foundation for persistence, and how has it helped you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest answer is when you're in your 20s, you can definitely drink as much as you want or party as much as you want, and you get up the next day and you can still do the things you need to do, hang out with friends, go to work on your hobbies. It's not a big deal. And then there's like a cliff that you fall off in like your mid 30s, where if you're still partying like you're in your 20s, you basically, sacrificing whatever percent of the next day to recover. So the deal starts to become not worth it. And honestly, if you're someone like me or you, Kyle, where you want to be a heavy achiever, what happens is when you party and socialize, you also want to do that in your socialization and partying. So you tend to take things to their most extreme. And that's a superpower and also a curse. You just need to know where to apply it. And so I would say you don't have to be completely sober, but if you're someone who you can't just have one or maybe two drinks and stop, and you always take it to extreme, or other things as well. Once you get the message, hang up the phone is sort of the deal. And it depends what you want from life, right? If you really want to be hedonistic forever and partying, I guess that's great, but probably not. Eventually you're gonna get bored with it, and you're gonna wake up one day and just have nothing to show for it. So it's one of those things where I think the baby boomers love this philosophy of how do we always have a good time and sort of punt on the problems. You see this manifest with things like infinite money printing, or, delaying infrastructure projects, or punting on problems, right? And I think that like at the societal level, it's really bad, and it's trickled down to the individual level. And if you live your whole life this way, what do you have to trade on? Like your memories, but you haven't built anything,
you probably don't have memories.
Yeah, I didn't want to live like that. And so, I'm an artist as well. I make music in my free time, and drugs and alcohol might help inspire the creative side. And yeah, you might put down some cool ideas while you're inebriated that then you can come back to and edit sober. But I think you get to a point where you don't even need to do that.
Did you experience that on your music? Did you find that it was starting to be detrimental to your because you do it quite regularly. You do the music thing regularly, right?
I do. And yeah, I find that, at some point there is the notion of write drunk, edit sober, and drunk could be any number of things. But after a certain point, I think you're really just hiding from something. Like, what's the reason that you need to alter your headspace? If you understand what that space is like, you don't need to keep going back. And at some point, you're just harming yourself. So I think it's a journey for everyone. Again, there's probably a spectrum of how people have a relationship to any substances, but then there's productive substances like, Adderall. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're borrowing from the future to do a little better in the present, maybe a little faster. Mm-hmm. But it's like using leverage with finance. And At the end of the day, you have to pay back what you borrow from the future. And that's not really worth it. Again, it might be something in your 20s that you find the trade-off is worth it, but I don't think that's true forever. And the other thing you're doing is you're slowly training yourself to require that substance to even produce at all. And so that's like a really dangerous point to get, because the other problem is if you use these things, again, time is going to slowly get the better of you. You don't want to be in your 40s or 50s or 60s and still reliant on that. And again, you're just training yourself to need those things. So I think it's a little bit of a trap, and I think the trade-off becomes not worth it fairly quickly. Other people can fight me on this. If you are Charlie Sheen-esque and you have tiger blood, maybe you do keep going, but I think you have to be honest with yourself. And I think the problem is almost no one is legitimately honest with themselves. If you really sit and pay attention to what's happening to your body and to your life and how you actually feel, and you're being honest with yourself, and you're not continuing to paper over it with additional substances, or maybe you're trading off parts of your life that you should be spent present, it's just not worth it.
You touched on the reliance part, which is the reason why I cut it, which was I was relying way too much on alcohol to deal with personal issues, for my social anxiety, going to events, which I do a lot of, and waking up in the morning and feeling like shit did not help my job either. And so one day I just, I had been fed this stuff from you and from other people like Daniel and Candela, who's a friend of mine that's been sober for a long time. And it just kind of clicked last year where I'm like, this is stupid. I don't know why I'm doing this.
I mean, another way to think about it is, do you want to feel the best that you feel in a given day when you go to sleep or when you wake up? You get to pick one of those. And if you drink, it's when you go to sleep. And if you're sober, it's when you wake up. So it's like you're attaching this stone to yourself every day. Even if you still get things done, it sucks. So
it does suck. And you don't even go to bed feeling great either. So it's some people might. For me, it was I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like crap and not be able to go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And that's terrible.
Yeah.
That is a terrible thing to deal with.
The anxiety of it in your 30s starts to be, I think that got to be the most, especially because that's like your body's way of saying, look, you got to stop this shit.
Yeah.
So
right. Absolutely. Well, so you touched on music as a hobby, and I wasn't planning on asking you this, but I've actually been struggling with this recently. I have been asked before on podcasts, at events, whatever social environment I'm in, hey, Kyle, do you have a hobby? And between work and my kids, and sometimes I read, I do not have a hobby. I mean, maybe you could say working out is a hobby for me. Like the 1 hour I spend a day working out is my thing. How do you do music, you've got your dogs, you walk around your property, you got a lot of things that you do, right? And what do you say to somebody who thinks they don't have a hobby? And should they get one, like me in particular?
I think working out is actually a hobby. I love working out. It's a hobby that involves, process and routine and form, similar to like Tai Chi or whatever. I think it's a great hobby. Kyle, you have kids. And so that's more important than, having hobbies in your free time. I think one thing millennials were lied about is, that having kids and increasing your family or starting a family is not the most important thing. So,
sure.
Like my wife and I want to start a family this year. And so we're going to work on that.
I was going to, that's awesome. Congrats.
And I could say I regret doing it sooner, but my father killed himself when I was young. One of my best friends was killed in college at a random act of violence. And I had a tough upbringing, and my family was not really close to me in a lot of ways, and never really engaged with me as an adult. And I think growing up without a father, like for me personally, it was hard for me to ever want to start a family since I never had that. But I've gotten to that point on my own, and so maybe it would have been bad for me to have kids when I wasn't ready. But other people would say, no, you're supposed to just do it and you grow into it. So it is what it is. Hopefully everyone gets there at their own pace. But in terms of having interests, it's never too late to start having an interest. There's so many stories of great authors and artists who started at in their 40s. I mean, the average age of the first startup founder is 42. So that applies to creative things as well. And I think another advantage of having waiting is you start any creative pursuit with this sort of beginner's mindset, which is a wonderful thing that you can never get back. So now if you start a hobby later, whatever that is, when you get into it, you have all of these experiences you've accumulated to apply to that beginner's mindset. And I think the work you create would be really interesting. So I think you're doing life right, Kyle. You have a great career, you have a family, you're in shape, you're sober. Like at any point you can decide you want to. And maybe this is something you do when you retire, which is great too. But I don't think there's any problems if you don't have hobbies or interests that are maybe traditional. You having a podcast and being a voice online, I think that's a legitimate hobby and use of time. Well, what is a hobby really? Something that has craft, gives you meaning, that you feel good about, that's not, I guess some people have wine tasting as a hobby, but hopefully it's not something that's destructive to you. And so I think you actually probably do have hobbies and interests, and by that definition. And so I don't judge anyone if you spend 5 minutes talking to someone at an event, even someone who might say they have no hobbies, and you're like, talk to them about what they do every day and things they spend their time on, it becomes apparent they do have interests, right?
Sure.
Unless they're really boring and they sit and watch Netflix, but people who go to events are more interesting than that. They wouldn't be at the event if they just watch TV.
Because they're actually at the event. But I will say, if you're a sommelier on the side, no offense, keep doing what you're doing. It's not something Adam and I would probably do. But I do think that when it comes to parenting, one thing I learned pretty early on is that you're never really ready for it. But I also think that there is a lot of value in making sure you are in the right headspace personally before you make a call of raising a human being. Because I wish that I would have cut a lot of stuff before I had kids, because the clarity that you have as a human and the value set and things that you want to put in place in order to also pass those to your kids is extremely important. And I just wish I would have done that sooner, of cutting the things that were numbing me, when in reality, truly living life is about not numbing it and dealing with your bullshit for the most part.
Yeah, your kids want you present.
Absolutely. Okay, so last question is a little meaty, so bear with me here, Adam. You have an article called "The Modern Atheist Movement is Wrong." You draw a line between the loss of transcendence in modern life and the way we consume, like consumerism, which I found fascinating and not something that I had thought about. It connects with, I do believe there's a loss of moral ground in society, and I'd fashion myself as more like non-theistic than atheist. It might be an easy thing for me to say as somebody that was raised in an evangelical Christian household, that it's always easy to become centrist than complete atheist. But I want to read something. Actually, I'm not going to do the article justice, but I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit for the people listening, and then you all can go read it because I highly recommend it. The modern atheist would argue we've evolved beyond the need for God, that human beings are rational creatures capable of crafting their own meaning. But if that were true, why are so many lost, anxious, and desperate for something deeper in this age of supposed enlightenment? The truth is, most people do need God, or at least something that functions like it, something to ground their lives in purpose larger than themselves. You also draw the line between the loss of transcendence in modern life and the way companies cut corners, which I had also never thought about, like Boeing, Big Food, some of the more less sustainable. And you called it end shitification.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that term.
Do you see the loss of transcendence shaping? You definitely see how it's shaping how companies operate. And if most people don't return to organized religion, how do we ground ourselves to make it a healthier culture? Because you and I both know that the stats in terms of organized religion and this idea of Gen Z believing in God is tanking. I think last stat I saw was 2018. It might be, there probably new data out, but how do we do this if we don't go back to the traditional way I was raised in an evangelical Church of God?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think the people who are maybe pushed too much into very, very rigid, rules-based religions.
Ultra conservative.
Yeah, they want to revolt and reject it. I think that's with anything you're pushed too hard on as a kid. That's not necessarily for you. I totally understand that. But if you look at In-N-Out Burger, where their founders are super religious, they even have, I think, Bible verses on the cups. And the company is consistently very good. Every location is excellent. They pay their store managers, $250,000 a year, which is, a good amount for a QSR worker. And I think having those moral values of religion is going to lead to a different type of company and management than the private equity extractive mindset of how much can we sort of take advantage of people. I'm not saying all private equity does that. There's been a lot of actually really good private equity turnarounds as well. So it's just an example. And of course, there's people that abuse religion as well, maybe megachurch preachers who ask for donations. But I think the concept of having something larger than ourselves is ingrained in humans. I don't think we get away from it. I think the further you try and push it away, I think just the unhappier you are. And that could be anything. You could get there through meditation. You could get there through music that you write
something
or listen to.
Something bigger than yourself. What you believe is bigger than yourself.
It has to be the end point of everyone being fully atomized, disattached from God, religion. I think the modern political movements want that, because then you're very easy to control and you substitute that movement for religion. And I think that happens a lot. I think that happens more on the left than the right. Certainly there are people on the right that are extreme, but the left is, has turned their back completely on God and religion. They think it's archaic and unnecessary. And I'm sure if you chart, there's charts about this now that show unhappiness. And it does say that liberals are less happy than conservatives. And I think one of the reasons why is they don't have God. And again, I say God in terms of whatever that could be for you. And it shouldn't be a political party. They don't have your interests at heart. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative. The politicians don't really have your interests at heart. It's like a big corporation just for the country. They're probably not doing things in your personal interest. Even if you like the party, it's just not a good thing that we've replaced church and temple, etc. with this. So I think if you find something that's transcendent in your life, maybe it's even, it could be travel. It could be painting. It could be nature. Nature's a good one. And once you have that, and that's sort of your highest value, or something that you see as more important and transcendental than what the thing of the day, your life gets so much easier because you have this wonderful, beautiful worldview of what's even going on here, that it's not something that can be shrunk into outrage culture and you're stuck online debating people or watching Fox News or MSNBC upset at the world, right? Like there's no time for that once you're engaged with the transcendent.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got 5 minutes. I have a business question and then we're done. So this is a quick hit. You wrote about American Eagle's campaign and the gap between the critics and real world results, which I find fascinating and something I'm following still with their earnings reports, right? Why do you think the marketing world gets caught up in narrative instead of impact?
Oh, so I think so much of the marketing industry, especially with the professional managerial class types, there's a certain worldview of, I think to your point, we're talking at the beginning of this call of disagreement is unacceptable, right? Yeah. And so our industry has suffered from such groupthink, from everyone going to the same conferences, having the same best practices, having the same people lecture to them, that I think it's like hearsay to go against it. And it's like you're sort of challenging who they are. And that's not a good thing, right? We need everyone to think for themselves.
Agreed.
And also be able to look at a customer segment and be like, I didn't like that ad, but it wasn't for me. It was for these customers. Or it was because the company did their research and was interested in this demographic, right? I think we need to give more credit to our marketing peers who are genuinely trying to do work that gets talked about and not always just be like, oh, this sucks. I hate this. This campaign was a failure. Like if our industry trades spent half the effort building people up who are doing interesting and new things versus trying to, bias that this narrative was bad, I think we would be a lot better off as a sector. But I think that we're doing a little better. I've seen enough people push back on the sort of meta narratives that marketers are supposed to have at this point that I'm somewhat optimistic. I see brands doing really interesting work, once again, some brands. And I think that in a long enough timeline, we are going to see, I actually think we're going to see more CFO and CEOs really care about what the marketing org is doing, because in a connected world, marketing is really the most important thing. So you can't just have these people operating in a silo and pushing specific agendas or doing things because their marketing peers will like it or not. Like you have a fiduciary responsibility to the company, however that manifests, to do the right thing for that brand. So I think we're at a good turning point for our sector, where we're going to see real creative work done once again. The other reason this is true is because if you're not doing that sort of work, really AI can do everything that you're already doing. So what's left? What is left for marketers other than to do things that are actually remarkable once again?
Yeah, and it's fascinating for you and I to talk about this, because I feel like both of us, we lean on being as creative as possible in B2B. Like I've been trying to get the creative director for Liquid Death on this call just to talk about how the hell he functions. He's great. He is great. Am I going to do a Ozzy Osbourne DNA direct mail to a bunch of like learning management people? No. But can I push my team to think a little bit more creatively and to say, I agree with you that we're going to take a huge swing back to creativity and brand being paramount as this technology just becomes more tactical in our day-to-day, especially AI. But okay, so we're at time. Adam, thank you for joining us. Where can people go to read all the stuff that you have? The link, like your LinkedIn. I think you're on X still. I'm pretty sure you're still a huge user of X, but where do they go? Where do they go to check you out?
Yeah, you can check out my Substack. Just search for Adam Singer, or Hot Takes is the name of my Substack if you want to read it. And yeah, I'm on X/Twitter or on LinkedIn. Just search for Adam Singer. I should come up. And yeah, or you can just Google me. Easy to do.
Yeah, he's big there. You're pretty prevalent online. Okay, last question. Sorry. What do you think about the rebrand of Twitter? In 2 sentences or less.
From Twitter to X?
Twitter to X.
Not what I would have done, but almost didn't matter because of how Elon has taken the site.
It's a great answer. All right, man. Very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Of course.